I'm really excited to introduce Reverend Tracy Heilman, who's going to be our first presenter and guest. I've had the privilege of getting to know Tracy out in Montana over the past year on a couple of visits out there. Tracy's a pastor of Community Congregational Church in Columbus, Montana, which is a rural town that in 2010, I don't know if it's changed, Tracy, but the population was 1,893. So, like many of our churches located in a small town. And for those of us who aren't as familiar with Montana, Tracy recently wrote me that Montana stretches as far as from Chicago to Boston. So that kind of blew me. I've been out to Montana, but I didn't realize it was that far from one end to the other. The Columbus Community Congregational Church has a strong history of being very active in the community. From hosting early on the Mothers and Preschoolers program, forming a community garden and a farmer's market, creating Project Hope, which is a thrift store, food pantry, and emergency assistance fund. And their membership and the people who attend are very diverse in their viewpoints, politically and otherwise. Tracy brings 25 years of experience with children and youth ministry and other things, and so one of the ways that they've grown and been very engaged in the community is a Wednesday after school program where up to 30 kids show up, have some healthy food and recreation, community service projects, and explore the sacred stories of our world. The kids there know that they're loved. And then part of what brought her to our attention, to my attention, and why I asked her to be here today is that they're located just 2 hours from Camp Mimanagish. Camp Mimanagish is the Montana Northern Wyoming Conference, which has 29 churches, by the way. Montana Northern Wyoming Conference has 29 churches. And this is their camp. And is located right on the northern border of Yellowstone National Park, just over that border. It's on and nestled along the Boulder River, which is where a portion of the movie A River Runs Through It was filmed, if I'm not mistaken. Mm-hmm. And a lot of the members of the Columbus Church have gone there when they were younger and found had a real transformative experience and spiritual awakening. And so they have a real love for the camp. But like a lot of camps, it's faced hardships financially, declining facilities, deferred maintenance. I know none of your churches have any deferred maintenance. You're all up on that. And lower registrations. But these folks who have been there and for whom it's made such a difference in their lives really want to see it be available for the next generation. And so one of the things that Columbus Church does is raise money to send kids from their community to the camp. In addition, they were able to come up with a pledge of $5,000 for some needed repairs at the camp last year. And then their moderator said, you know what? Why just us? There are 28 other churches in our conference, and challenged all the churches and said, look, we're a small church in a little town and we're giving $5,000. You can do that too. And their conference was able to raise over $50,000 that way for camp. Another of their members, and one of the things I like about Tracy and the way you operate and why you're here, is it's your members have these ideas and you empower them to carry them out. So the member had an idea to do an enter and a silent auction to support the camp, and they were able to raise $5,000 there. And then like many of our states, Montana, their foundations have a group together and have a day called Montana Gives, where they invite people to give to their favorite charities. And then there's sometimes a competition or a matching gift for various organizations. And so they participated in that and were able to raise for the camp through that. They were hoping to raise a few $1,000s at best. And one church was going to give the camp $20,000 and saw, I can give it this way. So they gave that to Montana Gives through the Columbus Community Foundation. And they ended up raising over $35,000 between that gift, other gifts, and then because they were one of the largest charities that day, they got a matching gift from the Community Foundation. So it's a little bit about their setting and about fundraising there. Tracy has 2 grown sons, one in New Hampshire, the other one still in Africa. She's coming back soon. Still in Africa, and then has a daughter who just started her senior year in high school. So Tracy, we're so glad you willing to take time out and join us and share a part of your story. So I invite you to tell us a little more about what's been successful. Oh, one more thing. She has a quote on the bottom of her emails from a church inscription in Sussex, England from 1730 that says, "A vision without a task is but a dream. A task without vision is drudgery. A vision with a task is the hope of the world." And I see you as one with a vision and one who puts your hand to the grindstone to carry out the tasks. So please share some of your wisdom with us.
Yeah, thank you, Andy. That's great. Yeah, so our camp, one of the real challenges that we faced at our camp is because it's in this beautiful wilderness setting. It's in the Absaroka Beartooth Wilderness, which is one of the largest wildernesses in the lower states. That's beautiful and wonderful, but it means we're not a year-round camp. Much of the year you can't get to it because of snow and things like that. And so really what we've been told by a lot of people is our camp really can't be viable. If you can't keep a camp open 12 months out of the year, you can't be viable. We believe that this sacred wilderness area is worth fighting for. And so that was really the challenge that we had with the camp. And the way we overcame the challenge was we just decided that we were going to succeed. That was really the piece that began for us, is we just decided that we weren't going to let this fail. We feel like this wilderness area, it needs our kids, and our kids need it. The wilderness needs our kids. When we think about, some of the issues that face us today, wildfires, all of these things that are coming about due to climate change and things like that. We can't expect a new generation of children and young people to grow up and care about the environment when they've never really experienced these wilderness places. We can't expect them to love the mountains and to love the rivers when they've never had an experience of it. And there are so many kids in my area especially who, even though they only live a few hours away from Yellowstone, they're not able to go to places like Yellowstone. The costs are just beyond their families. Their families don't necessarily have cars that are dependable enough to take kind of a family road trip. And so we really saw part of what we needed to do was to connect these kids to the outdoors in a way that they would grow to really love the outdoors. And Mimanagish is just a wonderful place for that, because you go to sleep, you're sort of nestled in the mountains. Mount Holly is the tallest mountain, and its shadow falls over the camp throughout the day. The Boulder River, you hear it morning, noon, and night. That sound just gets into you throughout the day. There's a small creek that runs through the camp that the kids spend hours finding frogs and racing boats and things like that. So we feel like even when the kids leave Mimanagish, they take part of that wilderness with them. And we think that's important for the wilderness as well as for the kids. It seems like we hear all the time about how children today don't have the opportunities, aren't given the chances to sort of be a little bit free range. We tend to organize and plan and dictate what kids will do. And we don't allow them to take the kind of risks that kids really need to take sometimes. We don't let them figure out, how do you play together with a group of kids and play a game and make it fair when you don't have adults standing there telling you exactly what you can and can't do. And so we also think that giving kids this opportunity at Camp Mimanagish really allows them to take some calculated risks. So risking going on a hike that maybe you didn't know you could do, a 2-mile hike. Maybe you didn't even know you knew how to make new friends. Sometimes we kind of laugh about at camp, a lot of kids have always had their parents sort of preparing meals for them. And we have to tell kids every year, when you make toast, you put the bread in plain. You don't put the toppings on the toast until it comes out of the toaster. And surprisingly, there are a lot of kids who need to be taught that, who need to learn that. So sometimes just making your own toast can be a little bit of a risk. So that's part of what we believe that Camp Miminogish can do for kids. And we felt that that was an important enough thing that we were just going to make it happen. As Andy said, we did some of these projects that started out fairly small. A church, our church decided that we would give 5,000. Our congregations, because they're so spread out across this vast area that is Montana, our churches really want to be connected. And that challenge really ended up being one of those ways that people really kind of started to get into it. Folks were calling each other up and kind of ribbing each other about, well, my church has already got 3,000. How much has your church got? And it really became kind of a friendly competition. The event that Andy talked about that we did, that was just a silent auction and a meal together with some entertainment. We had 4 or 5 churches from our area that participated in that. And again, it also, in addition to sort of raising money, what we were really doing is also building connections and helping our churches to sort of reconnect to each other. And we hadn't done that in a long time. We hadn't just gotten face to face with one another and talked about things that were important to all of us. So we feel like just choosing to succeed. And then the other part that we did is we decided to get really good at telling the story of Miminogish. We have people who are in their 60s and 70s and 80s who remember going to camp as young people. And as you might have an impression, Montana tends to be a bit more on the conservative side. But we have people in their 60s and 70s who remember going to camp as young people, and there was a Jewish rabbi who was there one year. And that was, the first time they had ever met somebody who wasn't Christian. And having that opportunity at camp to be cared for and inspired by and taught by a Jewish rabbi was a profound experience to them. And they want those kinds of experiences for young people today. They know what it did for them, and they want that to be available to other people. So we are getting really good at telling that story, and we're not afraid to ask for money. So, we not only do we go to our local community foundations, but we're now in the process of reaching out to the AmeriCorps Vista program and working with them on getting some folks to come in and help at our camp. So I don't know.
Tracy, can you give us a little context, a couple things? What is roughly the size of your church budget?
Oh, my church's budget?
Yeah.
Gosh, I should know that off the top of my head. I want to say it's about 150,000.
Okay. So, you're raising money for other things. How has that, a lot of churches, I say to them, look, I know this great congregation that sends their neighborhood kids to camp. Why don't you think about doing that? It helps enliven your church. And they're like, we don't have the money. And
right.
they fear that if they spend their money on that, they're going to have less money for their budget. So I wonder how this kind of passion, vision, giving to camp has impacted giving to the church.
It has been very positive. And what we find, and this is, I think that this might be a part of small towns, but there's a lot of people who care about kids, who care about other people, who care about their community. And so, for example, we were hoping to ask for $4,000 from the Community Foundation we were hoping that they would give us that amount of money to help pay for scholarships for about 15 to 20 kids from our local community to go to camp, and they turned us down. And so I had to go to our church council and say, we're still like really encouraging kids to come to our youth group and to come to camp. We had to find a way to get this $4,000. And the church council said, oh, okay, well, we'll get it. I mean, that really has been their approach to it. They see what's happening to kids, and so folks are willing to give to that. For us, it's really about the kids going, children and youth. But the congregation I serve is pretty amazing about this. A lot of churches say they want children and youth in their congregations. But when children and youth actually show up, and they're messy, and they tend to cost more money than they bring in. And a lot of congregations kind of start to feel like that's not really what we meant. And my congregation understands that our Wednesday after school program is really our second service. That the kids that come to our after school program, they don't come to worship on Sunday, but the congregation understands that for those kids, that Wednesday afternoon is their church. And so they see what's happening in the lives of those kids. They're developing relationships. And so they feel like their money is going to something that they see what's happening with it. They see the benefit of that money.
So how do they see that? How do they see it? If the kids aren't showing up on Sunday, and if your people aren't seeing them at camp, how do they see the impact that it's having or hear about that?
Well, a couple ways. A lot of them volunteer on the Wednesdays. So a lot of them, and we split up how you can volunteer so that you can do some very, very manageable kinds of things. You can just provide a snack, or, you can help out with something specific. So we have a lot of people who volunteer. And also because it's a small town, they hear about it. Folks in town appreciate what we're doing. Folks understand that a lot of the kids that are coming are kids that qualify for free and reduced lunches. So they're helping kids who who really need some adult intervention. They need extra adults in their lives. And so folks see that. The kids also volunteer at Project Hope, which is an organization that our church started many years ago. The kids volunteer there twice a month. And so people at the church see that the kids are also,
Yeah, just a reminder to folks, Carrie just put it on the chat, but if you want to ask any questions, you can put them in the chat there, or there's an email address. So when it comes to asking for money for things like camp, do you take a special offering? Do you go ask specific individuals who have a higher capacity to give? How has that worked?
Yes to all of those. Okay. I ask and I ask and I ask. Yeah.
How'd you get comfortable doing that?
I've always hated it in the past. I've never been good at it. And I believe in what we're doing. And so I think when you believe in what you're doing, when you can, talk about the benefits, it makes it easy for me. And so I have, when our kids come back from camp, we ask them, I'll have them write a thank you note, or I've done on Facebook, I've done little Facebook Live videos with the kids talking about what they loved about camp and things like that. And so I can then, use those to go to specific people who I know have the capacity. And I've done that. I've asked for specific scholarships to say, we have 3 kids that really need, X amount of money, and people will do that. I am just getting better about I'm not a grant writer. I don't know how to write grants, but it turns out you just do it. And so I things, and I try to find grants. And even if they're only $1,000 or something like that, I figure it's practice. And, it's helping me to kind of hone my skills in writing for those. So we just do a lot of asking.
Excellent. I would affirm, especially that storytelling piece. However, you can get that story out there to folks. You've mentioned two of the key things that I hit on whenever I go and talk to churches about stewardship and giving. One, what's your vision? You got to have your vision and be passionate about it and be willing to talk about it, and be willing to ask for it. And two, tell the stories. So, and it can be as simple as grabbing your phone, putting it in front of somebody and saying, what do you love about this church? What difference is this church making in a community, and getting that out there? We do have a question on chat. Linda asks, how do you advertise, so to speak, your Wednesday night program or your Wednesday afternoon program?
Okay, so we're really fortunate in this. Our schools don't really worry about separation of church and state. And so our elementary school lets us bring a flyer in that goes out to, there's 375 elementary students. So a flyer goes out to all the elementary students. I just talked with the middle school today. They're going to let us do the same. And at the high school, they will put announcements on their announcement board that we are asking high school kids if they would be willing to come and help. So that's a huge one. I use Facebook a lot. And so after every Wednesday program, I will post 6 or 8 pictures, and we will often get a reach of 500 to 600 from those posts. And then we have a small newspaper in town, and I do an article in that about twice a month. And I'm fortunate that one of the women in my church takes my sermons and kind of edits them into kind of a column. So she turns my sermons into a column, so I'm not having to write extra things. So those are some of the ways we're doing the advertising.
Small town papers are great. They'll print just about whatever you give them.
That's right.
You're in a small town. Take advantage of.
That's right. That's right.
Thanks, Tracy.